Hi, my name's Matt. I'm the plant department manager here at Josh's Frogs, and today I will be showing you how to set up a vivarium with a small water feature. I have to admit, this is my first ever vivarium. I've been maintaining planted aquariums for over a decade, but I've never attempted to keep dart frogs. I always figured they were difficult to keep and that it would be much too expensive to set up a vivarium to keep them in. Luckily, I was completely wrong about both. Not only are dart frogs easy to keep happy and healthy in a naturalistic vivarium, but it's also much more affordable to set up a vivarium than I had thought. Let's move on to the setup. Today, I will be using a 20-gallon long aquarium. We'll start with the background first. I'll begin by adding a small amount of Great Stuff spray foam in the corner of the tank. Then I add a piece of PVC pipe within the foam. You'll see why this is important later in the video. On top of the foam, I add one of our mounted bromeliads by Sprig & Stone. These are really cool. They're pieces of cork bark with bromeliads pre-mounted, so you don't have to awkwardly try to attach them to the background after the tank's set up. These can be used in already established vivariums too, though. Next, I add more foam and a few universal rocks. These are faux rocks that are totally safe for frogs and much lighter than real rocks, so the tank won't weigh so much when it's filled. I then add a lot more foam, more mounted bromeliads, and more universal rock, along with a few manzanita branches, which I will use to attach some different tillandsias. After getting the background decor just like I wanted it, I fill in the gaps and cracks with a bit more foam. I ended up using quite a bit more than I expected I would, about 2 cans. In this tank, since I wanted a water feature, it's necessary to add a length of black tubing for the waterfall. I noticed the foam was sliding a bit and moving from where I wanted, so I used some net pots that I didn't end up needing to hold everything in place. Normally these net pots would be placed within the foam used to hold plants that normally wouldn't be able to grow in the background, but I couldn't find room for them in this small setup. The foam needs to cure for about a week before we do anything else. This is really important, as some of the chemicals released during the foam's curing process are not safe for frogs. Once cured, however, the foam is completely inert and non-toxic. The next step is to trim the foam. This is for 2 purposes. It shapes the foam into a more natural shape, and the internal structure of the foam provides a much better surface for the silicone that I'm using later to adhere to. You can use any sharp knife for this. I use my pocket knife for big pieces and a razor blade for the tight areas. Whatever feels safest and most comfortable for you is perfectly fine. The next step is to add silicone. It's important that you only use vivarium-safe silicone, which we have available here at Josh's Frogs, and can also be found at some specialty aquarium stores. Construction-grade silicone contains chemicals that inhibit mold growth, and it's not safe for use in the vivarium. First, I apply silicone over a relatively small area, then with a gloved hand, rub it into the foam. After the silicone is thoroughly rubbed into the foam, I sprinkle on some of Josh's Frogs Cocoa Cradle. This covers up the silicone and makes the background look much more natural. After sprinkling it on, I pat it down to make sure it's firmly attached to the wet silicone. And then repeat this process over the whole background until all the foam is covered up. The finished background looks so much better than when we began. Like the foam, the silicone also has to cure. Wait a week before moving on any further. The next step is to install the water feature. I begin by adding the pump and attaching it to the black tubing. This is where the PVC pipe comes in. It's used to hide the cord, and it also makes it easier to change out the pump than if I had just put the cord into the foam. I also chose to add a small piece of pond wall substrate stop around the pump. This will prevent any substrate in the pond from getting into the motor of the pump and wearing it out prematurely. I then add a wall made out of pond wall substrate stop to separate the pond from the floor of the vivarium. I chose to cut the pond wall substrate stop shorter in order to have a shallower substrate layer. I regretted this and had to change it later. After shaping the wall like I want it, I add Josh's Frogs false bottom to the vivarium floor. This works as a drainage layer and keeps the substrate from becoming waterlogged and toxic to the plants and frogs. I chose to go with a 2-inch layer, but then later realized that this was too shallow and had to tear everything up and add another inch of false bottom. I needed about 2 bags when all was said and done. Next, I add some aquatic plant substrate to the pond area. I'm using ADA Aqua Soil, a product that I often use in my planted aquariums at home. This is far from necessary, and many different types of substrates can be used, including sand and gravel. It all depends on what you like and what you think will look best. The next thing to add is Josh's Frog's substrate barrier. This keeps the substrate from mixing with the false bottom. After cutting a piece to size, I lay it down on top of the false bottom. Now it's time for Josh's Frog's ABG. ABG is a substrate invented by Atlanta Botanical Gardens that's great for growing all types of plants and lasts a very long time in damp and humid conditions, so it's a perfect substrate for a dart frog vivarium. We mix it by hand in-house. Again, I needed about 2 bags. After laying down the substrate, it's time for my favorite part, plants. The next step is to add background plants. In this vivarium, I chose to add a few miniature orchids in addition to the mounted bromeliads that are already part of the background. As for terrestrial plants, I chose a lemon button fern in the right back corner, a philodendron moonlight for the left-hand side, and a ajuga chocolate chip, and a pink cryptanthus for the center. After planting the plants, I add a layer of damp, long fiber sphagnum moss. This layer prevents the ABG from sticking to the frog's delicate skin. I also chose to add a pinguicula, also known as a butterwort, which is our carnivorous plant. It's a bit of an experiment though, and to be honest, I don't know if it'll work out long term in the tank. For ground cover, I chose Peperomia prostrata, a really cool and somewhat rare vine, in addition to some sheet moss. I later decided the background was a bit bare and added some tillandsias, also known as air plants, to the manzanita branches. For the pond, I chose Rotala indica bonsai and Littorella uniflora, also called American shoreweed. These should fill out nicely with time and create a swamp sort of look to the pond. Along with some more universal rock and some manzanita branches laid over the pond wall, the transition between the terrestrial and aquatic areas should look quite natural. When adding water to the pond, I use my hand to break up the flow. That way the substrate won't be disturbed and I won't have to replant the plants. The flow from the pump is a bit strong, so it needs adjusted slightly. There it is, my first ever vivarium build. I had a ton of fun putting everything together and learning about the process. I know it'll provide me with entertainment and joy for years to come. I'm lucky to have all the components for this build available to me at work, but with the internet, everything at Josh's Frogs is available right at your fingertips as well. I hope this helps you on your quest to create the perfect vivarium, but if you have any questions or even just like some ideas, we're just a quick call or email away. Thanks for watching.